Welcome to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Alyssa Dver. Alyssa, thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course, thank you.
I am so glad you're here. And I would love for you to start with, how did you get into writing?
Oh gosh, full confession. I remember back in my SAT days, which was 150 years ago, that I scored extremely high on math and extremely low on English. And everyone told me at that part of my life, like, follow the score. So there's such irony because as I started into my career as a marketing product management person and I was writing stuff, it was kind of boring stuff, but whatever. People kept saying, "You're a really good writer." I'm like, yeah. Sure. So my first book, which was an Amazon bestseller back in 2003, I think it was, it's forever ago, was Software Product Management Essentials, because it was that technical kind of, this is process writing. And I felt very comfortable in the lane. And then I realized I actually really like doing it. So I am so not that person who went to school for it. And here I am 7 books later. I mentioned to you, I just started the 8th. And people like my writing. And now it's gotten really far from that technical. I mean, still brain science and all that, but I mean, it's storytelling and ranting and all kinds of other writing. So for all you out there who told you never write, pshaw.
I love that. Pshaw. So, but what you said about the technical writing and feeling like it was in, your lane to be able to do, you did transition to move to other styles of writing, even staying under the nonfiction umbrella, but still there were pivots. So would you talk a bit about when you started to realize that maybe you could try something a little different and weave in storytelling?
Yeah, now with all due respect, I have profound respect for writers. I have actually some in my family who are, PhD level writers. I'm actually reading a fabulous book for all those who are out there called Rebel Without a Clause, because I just love the language, right? And I love language and grammar and all that. It's just part of who I am. So part of the writing attraction for me is putting that beautiful sentence together, making sure that everything works and it's correct. There is an analytical aspect of it, but I am also a raving creative. So the ability to create and craft something in writing became very much attractive to me. And I wrote a book, I think the pivot point, because I was writing very, I don't want to say clinical, but formulaic almost, marketing lane, this is, how-to books, was, I don't even know the year, to be honest with you, but a good 15 years ago, I would say, a book called Misinformed, Wake Up Wisdom for Women. And it was a rant. It really was a rant of a thing. I had a lot of passion about, why are people telling us women to do these things? It's preposterous to act like this, to compromise our confidence, to act in the gender lane. Like, I just was on fire, and I got really creative in that book, and people loved it. They loved it. And actually, to this day, people who trip on it, buy it, see it in my office, whatever, they get it, and they're like, "This is brilliant." And I'm like, you know what? That was my pivot point, where I was like, this can be really fun. It doesn't have to be so formulaic or kind of puzzle piece in that way, but you can infuse it with creativity, with personal stories. And the more that I started sharing about my own story, about things that would happen and or other people's stories, it just became richer and more fun. So that was a pivot point. And from there on, one of the things that I think is often asked of me is, there's blog kind of writing, and then there's book writing, and there's all these different categories. And I think in some cases, when you figure out why you really love to write, you follow that channel. And, that's what happened with me. I followed the channel to be like, okay, that's the kind of writing. Can I write books? Can I write blogs and stuff? And everything that we write now has that kind of personality to it.
I love that you say that, personality, because you're right. You're writing however it shows up in whatever style. There is a personality, a flair for it, of how that's showing up. But when you were talking about so you wrote this, it's a pivot point, and you were including stories in it, both yours and others. How did you know which stories to include and which ones to go, I don't think I need to do that one, or I like that, but I need to construct it in a different way because I don't necessarily want to say exactly how it panned out, but I want the intention, the gist, and if we have to have some honesty to it, and have integrity, but just I don't need to put all the details. So how did you discern those?
I was actually interviewed by somebody else recently, and they asked me the question, do I write or present first? Which is the cart and the horse for me? And I present. I figure out how to tell the story quickly, compellingly. And if it doesn't land, it's like a comedian. If it doesn't land, the joke doesn't land, it doesn't get used. So that is my rehearsal stage before I write. And that makes it a lot easier. You know, I have the book in my head, I present it. And then when I actually sit down to write, it's like, you know, cognitive vomit. It just comes out because it's been rehearsed so much. Sorry, I know. And so
That was awesome.
went all
No,
over.
but that's great because I mean, it feels like, you know, when it is just coming to you and it's flowing, it is just coming out. And sometimes it's almost like your hand is just a vessel to be able to get, or to either type it or to write it physically, to just get those thoughts out of your head and down to something more tangible, a paper, a screen on
Right.
the page.
But,
So yeah.
but there's a difference, right? Because I have read, and I'm sure you with your editing background, people who do just literally vomit on a page, and it is vomit on a page. This is not untested. I go and I present 30 to 50 times before I put pen to paper or fingers to the keyboard, because it is that validation of how to tell a story. I have this phenomenal story about how I got into neuroscience and the confidence space about my son. And when I used to tell it, it was like a 10-minute thing. People would sob. It was great, but it was 10 minutes. I'm like, can't do that, like, especially in a book form. So you start to learn what the essential parts are, what the right words are. And again, and maybe it's that geek in me that still wants to have the perfect sentence where it's just enough that you understand and it has the emotional impact, but it's not all that flowery. I don't have an hour with people, and God knows nobody's reading anymore. So if it can't be done in a minute or less, forget about it. It's out. So to practice that, you have to do it 100 times before you, for me, I have to do it 100 times before I start typing it. And that's what I mean. Then it just comes out because I've been doing it so much that it isn't really thinking about the writing at that point. I know it's this is how it works in this box.
Okay, so you have hit on a few things that I would love for you to expound upon, because a lot of your point about presenting is so important. And as a writer, once the book is published, they have to go out and talk about it. They have to pitch. They have to show up and own the space that they've created by having published this book. So there's an element of presenting in that way, whether or not they're showing up on a podcast or on a stage somewhere or at a book signing or asking someone to do something because it's a pitch or what have you. So that idea of presenting, I love that you talked about that you mentioned that. And I know you have the confidence piece. So would you transition some, but like to help a writer who might be a little bit not as confident about having to do that, like that idea of, oh, now I have to do this, is a little bit intimidating. How could you offer some insights from your
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, no, well put, because I, you know, again, with the family members and friends that I have who are writers, they're not all what I would categorize, and I hate categorizing anyone, but traditional extroverts that want to jump on stage and present, right? With that said, it doesn't have to be a TED Talk. It could be just a conversation with a friend. Let me tell you the story. Let me give you this explanation, right? It could be your kids. It could be your partner. It could be the local chamber of commerce. And one thing that I think is really important, just as a skill set, is being able to explain what your book is about and who and should read it and why. So even if it's just that pitch, that little bit, I'm writing a book about, to test the concept to see if people are interested. Now, here's the real secret that most people don't want you to know. Few people are going to tell you that it's a sucky idea. So don't take the feedback literally. Like, oh, Jen, I love that. That's a great idea. Because it doesn't mean they're going to take out their wallet and buy that book. What you want to ask them is why? What is it about the idea that you liked? What are some things in that conversation that you found confusing or not as clear as it could be? Or explain it back to me so that I can hear how you would sell it to somebody else, right? Use those interview opportunities, those presentation moments as testing beds, as ways of really picking somebody's brain, what they heard, how they would interpret it. I think that introvert or extrovert, anyone can do that, right? And do that 10, 15 times, like just talk to people, talk to the dog, for crying out loud. We're on Zoom right now. I always say to people, record yourself, listen to yourself. You're going to be the hardest critic of all. Do it, record it, and then listen. And you'll be like, oh, right? So all these are ways of you can, quote, present without having to jump on a stage.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know your background also with the neuroscience. Would you talk about that as it relates into also how can a writer leverage that neuroscience background, the teachings that you might have to help them continue to get out of their shell?
Well, bigger conversation, of course, that we could go for 3 days, but I'm going to give you like kind of the essence of the work that we do at the American Confidence Institute. And it centers around the fact that when we have a moment of fear, particularly fear of 3 big ones, fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of regret, our confidence kind of goes, ooh, and our brains say that's that alarm that goes off in our amygdala that says, you may really screw up here. So as a writer, there's a lot of all of that going on, right? We're scared people aren't going to like our writing. We're scared that the book's not going to sell, all that. And so instead of saying to ourselves, okay, what's the worst that could happen? Why I can do this. I've written a bazillion other things and people like my writing, and not everybody's going to like my writing, but some people, all the logical, rational stuff that happens in our prefrontal cortex, instead of pushing up into that part of our brain and telling the rest of our brain to knock it off, we go into our brainstem and we start to act in very protective ways. And our brainstem is there to protect us. It's our survival skills, if you will, our reactions. And it could be that we get really aggressive and defensive, or we get shy, recluse. We don't want to talk about it to anyone. Somebody in my family, I won't throw them on the bus. She is a spectacular writer. She has a master's degree in it, and she will not share her work with the family because she's worried that somebody's going to not like it. I'm like, that's to me, it's preposterous, but to her, it's a real fear. And so, number one, not everybody is going to like it. That's okay, and that's good. And number two, if you're scared of putting your writing out there, I would invite you to really think about why. What is it that's freaking you out? Look it in the eye and figure out a way to overcome that. Because if you have that love of writing and that skill, please bring it to the world.
I love how you said that. Please bring it to the world. So you mentioned that if you feel scared, though, talk about that a little bit more, like unpack that just a bit.
Okay, so let's say that somebody, and you probably have had this all the time. People always say to me, oh, I would love to write a book. And I would say, well, why don't you? Well, and there's 1,000 reasons why they don't want to do it, right? And it's, I don't have time. I don't know how to do it. There's always a reason. And I always say to people, there's 40 million, I think, writers' books out there. Other people have done it. They're human. You're human, right? Yeah. So you can do it too. So first and foremost, check in with your will. Because if there's a will, there's something called the internet, and you can figure it out. There is tons of people, yourself included, Jen, that will give you the directions on how to get it done. In fact, you can hire people to get it done for you. But if you don't have a will, there's no way. So check in with the will. And so when we get that kind of can't do it, people aren't going to like it, I'm going to be embarrassed, you have to say to yourself, wait a minute, I really want to do this. Number one. Number two is what's holding me back? What is that fear? And how can I overcome it in a way that is maybe very small and easy, but at least is a step in that direction? So test it. Go out to Starbucks, and say, hey, I'm writing a book. I'd love to run the idea by you. Those are ways that you can kind of overcome that fear. Again, I'm simplifying it very, very much so here, but the fear in our brain is our brain telling us, you got to do more footwork. You got to do a little bit more preparation. You got to convince yourself, A, that you can do it, and B, that you want to do it.
So what I am hearing you say is that it's really about making choices that are really about expanding how you're thinking, expanding your mindset, expanding your approach, a choice to trust yourself, to say, I can do this. I was given this idea for a reason. I was given this story to tell. I'm excited about it. I'm choosing to do this. I'm making that decision to it. That's really what I'm hearing to this. Would you agree?
Well, that's why the last book I named Confidence is a Choice. I mean, it is a choice.
How is that transition?
Yeah, so neurologically and definitionally, that's what the book is about, is it proves the point that your confidence is a choice. You choose if you're going to be confident, and confidence isn't kind of confident. There's no gray in there. You either are or you're not. It's like being pregnant, right? You are or you're not. There's nothing in the middle. So when you make a decision that this is something I want to do, you're confident you want to do it. Okay, great. Now you got to figure out how to overcome the fear of, I don't know if this idea is sellable. I don't know if it's what people want. Okay, so how can I fix that? And you bite things off. So you don't necessarily have to take the huge leap. I'm going to write a bestseller. Like, you don't have to do that, but you have to at least make a decision that if it's something you want to do and there's a fear that's holding you back, that you want to overcome that, that is the name of the game.
And to your point about that big leap, it's not just about that big leap. There's a lot of little steps and little leaps that you're making to get to that edge, even though you might not have realized you were making them. Just the sheer fact that you said, hey, today I think I'm going to go to Starbucks. And even in the middle, while I'm there waiting for my order, and I ask that person next to me, hey, I got this idea. I'm just curious what you think. You've made a decision, yes, in that moment, but that was a leap. You didn't know what was going to happen, and yet you tried. You put yourself out there. And the other part that I'm hearing too is something that I encourage, where when you don't see something worked out the way you thought, however that is, get curious about it. What could you do differently versus saying like, oh, I failed? No. What are the lessons here? What could I do differently? How might I agilely make some adjustments and try again versus saying, okay, well, that's done. That didn't work. Peace out. I mean, I've tried and I'm done. You know, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I've done podcasts and blogs, and it's in my books. Life is a laboratory, folks. If nobody's told you that before, I'm telling you now, life is a laboratory. One of my favorite quotes, Thomas Edison says, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways it didn't work. Because a failure tells you, it eliminates, it's like, process of elimination. It eliminates these variables and ways that you're doing things. And even if you do succeed, the next day, something could change, the temperature or whatever, right? So there is this, it's not even growth mindedness, it's agility. It's this ability to say, that didn't work. Okay, what was it that I did? So I don't do that again. Right. And that's life. But the more you practice that, not only do you get better and better and better at doing the right thing, but you almost become a sense of humor about it. Like, boy, that didn't work, So it makes it a lot easier to handle. And one thing that I wish somebody had told me in spades before I wrote even my first book, right? 7 in and all that, is a book is a book. It's not you. It's not your life. It's a chapter of your life, to carry the metaphor, right? It's just part of what you're doing. So I think sometimes people get so wrapped up that we're going to put this book out and it's going to be the game changer. No, it's not. It's just part of your journey. And so go at it, do your best job, and assume you're going to write book 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you know what? I'm actually following an author right now because it was fascinating to me. I read her last book and I loved it. So I grabbed another one, which was like her first book, and it sucked. And I was like, it took her like 8 books to get it right. So I'm still on that path. I'm working on the 8th book. I hope this one's but it's not my whole story. It's just the chapter of my life as a writer.
I love how you put that. I think a lot of what I'll see at times too is when the writer has decided, okay, I've got the manuscript, I'm ready to pitch, and I want to pitch an agent or see if I can have a publisher to work with me, and they get a rejection letter, and then another one, and then another one. And so I've always heard the saying, like, okay, well, you probably need a thicker skin with that. And there might be some truth to that, but there's also an element of saying, now, what else do you need to do to refine what you're doing? But sometimes when you've initially release this thing that you have spent so much time caring for. You've been nurturing and caring and growing this little book to be something, from nothing to something. It can be a little daunting or off-putting at first when you hear something, no, I'm not interested. No, it's not meeting whatever I need. So how might you encourage that writer who is showing up and trying things that are different, but yet they might not be feeling like they're getting the traction and they're starting to get in their head?
Yeah. So again, another thing that I kind of wish somebody had knocked me in the head a lot sooner. It's a game and nobody really tells you the rules. So I'm going to tell you the rules. Your idea and your book concept may be brilliant. It may be brilliant and it may really appeal to a lot of people, but that's not what's going to get you the publishing deal. What's going to get you the publishing deal is what's called the platform. And the platform has to do with how many people follow you, like you, that you can reach, and how many books are you going to sell for that publisher. And so the crazy part about it, unfortunately, is that when you have a platform, I have hundreds of thousands of followers and all this now, especially through my deal. I'm a spokesperson for L'Oreal. So I have like this huge platform. I mean, I could write the biggest piece of crap and the publisher would be like, yeah, we're on it. So do not let lack of interest in what you are birthing be the monitor for your success or interest thereof. I also wish somebody would have told me that a book, again, is not just a chapter in the whole story, but it's a piece of your whole brand. It's not the brand. So you have to think about, how does the book leverage other things? Nobody gets rich on books. Sorry if nobody ever told you that. J.K. Rowling's maybe, big Patterson and some of the other big ones, and they're writing like voraciously every minute. But the book is a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle. So look at a book as, what is it going to get you to the next level, whatever that means for you. And your platform, whether we like it or not, social media, email, all of that. Where can you sell books? Yeah, you can stand in the parking lot and sell them out of your trunk, but that's not what a publisher wants to bet on. They have to put time and money into your book. The title and the concept is not what's going to sell it, especially online.
So with that in mind, to your point about the book being, I would liken that to like an ecosystem. It's a part of the business entity, but I really would like you to expound just a little bit more about how you said it's a part of the business and the brand, but it's not the whole thing. Would you expound just a little bit there?
Absolutely. So it's just pure economics, right? And you went down this path of a publisher. So let's use that as the business model, right? So let's just say the book is, I don't know, $20 to buy online, right? Publisher is going to take all but maybe $5. That's a generous publisher, getting a couple percentage points on that, net of all the fees that Amazon and everybody else is charging. So multiply $5, more like probably $1. But let's just use $5. You got to sell a lot of books to make a living. Again, millions of books, sure, but nobody sells a million books. People say bestsellers are 1,000 books or more. That's $5,000. I don't know about you, Jen, but that doesn't rock my world. It's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of cost that goes into it. So that book is a business card for other things. And other things have to be either programs, e-classes, presentations, consulting services, whatever it is that you want to sell to make a living. The book is sorry if I'm being so crude, kind of a very fancy business card. Now, with that said, I personally believe a book gives you more credibility than a PhD, because you can say the author of, and people go, oh, right? So it is a great thing to do and a huge personal accomplishment and something you can be proud of forever. And if you never sell any more than to your mother, and maybe even your mom doesn't buy it, just saying, you've done it. It's a great thing to do. So please do not take it as me saying, don't do it because you're not going to make money. Do it, but be realistic about that's not going to be the lever for the money. That's going to help you get money for other things.
So how might a writer think through like what that book, if they're trying to make that pivot in the sense of saying, I want to write something in the context that it serves the market or serves my audience in a way that it's a part of the bigger picture, like that, to your point, leading into a speaking engagement or a program. how might they kind of reverse engineer that? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, good. I love the fact that you said reverse engineering. It's exactly what it is. So reverse engineering, for example, when I book a speaking gig, I have a very high ticket price now, but I'll throw in PDF copies of my book for everyone who fills in a feedback form. That's high value to a booking agent. Or you want me to do a signing on site, I'm happy to do that. One of the things I also learned as a hard lesson is schlepping books is not fun, right? So if you're going to do something where you're doing on-site signings or you're doing book tours, it's kind of a pain in the neck to do it by bringing books or having them shipped there. It doesn't even matter, even if the books are there, because then you get leftover books. You're like, what do I do with these? So be mindful about when my book is published, how am I going to use it in my marketing and my sales strategy? And I gave you one example. I make that as part of the offer to kind of get that price up to the point where they don't, get all hysterical. Other things that I think really help is, again, putting it in your bio, leveraging it, using quotes from your book as part of your social. I mean, you have this beautiful amount of content now. You can just pull quotes constantly. You could be like doing little video snippets on it. So use the book again as part of the marketing mix, but don't assume that people are just going to buy your book and you're going to get rich. It's just, I'm sorry if anyone's crying right now, but that's just not the way it works.
But but what I hear you offering are the solutions. So to your point, even if fear is kicking in, saying, "Oh my gosh, now what do I do?" You're demonstrating the very type of thinking that needs to be happening. Okay, so now what do I do? Even if someone didn't know all of this at the beginning and now they have a lot of books they do need to sell, these are ways to think through. Okay, so this is where I am now. Great. I still took a lot of big steps and little steps to get to this point, and I'm still further along on that journey. So now what can I do? What changes do I need to make? How can I experiment with ways to broaden this reach or change how I'm talking about something, but yet still staying authentic to what I created and the book I've published, however that is. So it's not necessarily, even if you're not at the very beginning where you can construct all of those pieces in one spot, you still can say, okay, so now what? What can I do that feels good and that I'm going to enjoy it? Because that's the other part, is that you want to feel good, because when you feel good, you're going to exude that and that will come
Absolutely.
through.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. Now, one other really good marketing tip, and again, I can't stress this enough because it's a hard one to really to when somebody tells you this, you're going to be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But there's this thing called an addressable market. An addressable market, by definition, is, in my definition, I should say, if you can go to LinkedIn and search for a list of people who fit that profile, right? So writers could be a addressable unit, or writers in Boston, right? The more precise, the better. And so your addressable market is so critical to anything you're selling, let alone a book. But when you're defining your book, really think about who's my addressable market? Who really wants to read this book? Who could I sell it to, test it with, and subsequently sell other things to? And I think part of the problem is, and I've done this myself, confidence applies to everybody, but it makes it really hard to market to everybody. Right? So when you figure out who is it that you really want to reach, educate, entertain, motivate, whatever whatever the reason is you're trying to reach them, the narrower the definition, the better chance that you can really get data from them and really cater to them. And if it only stays with them, you've succeeded. But most likely, then other people are going to be like, wait a minute, I'm not a writer, but I really like that book. Right? Or I really, that's not me, but I have a whole group in my company that would really like to hear your voice. That just changes the game so much. I don't even know how to express the difference it makes.
You're right, though. That's that ripple effect. To me, you don't know where that one piece of goodness or that one thing that you've shared, that act of kindness or that book that you've written or that thing you've said, how it will touch someone else, because that person realizes they can say, hey, you ought to check this out, or let me give this to you. And you don't know the impact that you can
You
make.
don't, but if you don't start with Undressable Market, where you're really reaching that initial person in a way that is that visceral emotion, right? You can't do that if you try and appeal to everybody. You know, if I'm going to write a book and I'm going to write it for writers and I'm going to tackle, you know, something like getting over the fear of writing, right? It's still a little generic, right? If I said to myself, and you know what, I'm going to write a book on the fear, getting over the fear of writing, having confidence to get over the fear of writing for writers who are doing nonfiction, who've never written a book before. All right, now I'm starting to get there. And so now I can ask people in that category, what are your pain points? Do you like when here's a story? Like, then I have a really good beachhead, as you know, Jeffrey Moore would say. That's where I'm going to start. And you're right, after you get that beachhead, you get those loyal, rabid fans, they're going to tell 10 people, and you'll follow those leads to the next beachhead, the next market. But if you don't start somewhere like that, it's really flipping hard to figure out how to market. It's not anything, let alone a book.
Totally, totally understand. Alyssa, this has been awesome. Thank you so, so much. Where can people connect with you? Where can they get your books, especially the Confidence?
Yes. Well, Confidence is a Choice is the meaning, the title, and it's on Amazon, of course. The best way, the easiest way to reach me, because as you know, Jen, my name's a little tricky to spell. It's DVER, but AmericanConfidenceInstitute.com. You can find out more about the confidence work, the book, about me, and there's a contact form if anyone wants to reach me. If anyone's brave enough to look up my name, Alyssa, ALYSSADVER.com, or on LinkedIn, love to hear from anyone anytime.
Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been so much fun.
Good. Thank you.